The hook and the dangerous moment. The door doesn't close loudly. It never does. Los Angeles, 1946, early evening. The Beverly Hills Hotel. A private suite on an upper floor, thick carpet swallowing footsteps, curtains half drawn against the still bright California sun. The air smells faintly of cigarettes, cologne, and expensive paper. No one speaks when Hedda Hopper unfolds the memo. Not at first. She sits near the window, hat still on, gloves folded neatly in her lap. Her posture is relaxed in the way only powerful people can afford to be relaxed. Across from her, an MGM publicity chief leans back slightly too far in his chair as if distance might soften what's coming. Two studio fixers stand near a side table, pretending to be interested in the decanter no one has touched. The memo is only one page. Thin-typed official. Hopper doesn't rush, she smooths the paper once with her palm. The sound is barely audible, but in the room it lands like a signal flare. Then she smiles. It's not a friendly smile, it's not cruel either, it's the smile of someone who has already decided how this ends. She clears her throat. No one interrupts her. She reads one line out loud. Just one. The words are clinical, boring, even, a designation, a label. One rising actor, unnamed in this room but known to everyone in it, described as uncooperative. That's it. No accusations, no scandals, no threats. But the silence that follows is immediate and total. The MGM man's jaw tightens. One of the fixers glances at the carpet, the other stares at the wall like it might start talking for him. Because they all know what that word means. Uncooperative doesn't mean difficult. It means finished. Hedda Hopper doesn't explain, she doesn't need to. In 1946 Hollywood, explanations are for people without leverage. She simply lowers the memo slightly and looks around the room, eyes moving from face to face, slow and deliberate. Is that the language you're settled on? She asks calmly. No one answers right away. The pause stretches, 3 seconds, maybe 4. That's when the danger becomes real. This isn't a meeting about gossip. This isn't about headlines or column inches or whose name appears above whose in tomorrow's paper. This is about whether a human being will continue to exist in Hollywood at all. Because Hopper doesn't destroy people with lies. She destroys them by deciding not to mention them. The MGM publicity chief finally nods, once small. That's the internal assessment, he says. Internal. Hopper's smile widens just slightly. Internal documents aren't meant to leave file drawers. They aren't meant to be read aloud in hotel suites. They aren't meant to be shared with a woman whose column reaches millions every morning. But here it is. On the table. Between them. She folds the memo carefully and places it beside her purse. The gesture is precise, controlled, almost tender. The room exhales without realizing it. Then she says something far more dangerous than the line she read. Then we won't need to print anything, Hopper says. It's not a question. One of the fixers shifts his weight. He understands before the others do. Printing something would be loud, messy, traceable. Silence, on the other hand, is invisible. Silence can't be disproven. Silence can't be sued. Silence can't be quoted. The MGM man opens his mouth, then closes it again. He knows better than to negotiate now. Negotiation implies options. There are no options left in this room. Hedda Hopper has just been handed a career, wrapped neatly in studio language, and asked to make it disappear without a sound. She rises slowly, smoothing her skirt. The meeting is already over. No one called it. No one needed to. As she moves toward the door, she pauses. Of course, she adds lightly, if circumstances change. She lets the sentence trail off. Everyone understands the rest. Circumstances don't change unless the studio wants them to. The door opens, hallway light spills in, briefly illuminating the faces left behind. They look older than they did an hour ago, smaller. When the door closes again, the room feels emptier than it should. No papers are signed. No hands are shaken. No threats are recorded. But something irreversible has just happened. Because in that moment, a decision was made that would never appear in contracts, court records, or official histories. A name would stop appearing. Invitations would dry up. Phones would stop ringing. And when people asked what happened to that promising young star, the answer would be a shrug. He just didn't work out. That's how it always sounds from the outside. Inside, it sounds like silence. And this was not an isolated moment. This was a demonstration. Hollywood in 1946 was not ruled by fists or guns or shouted commands. It was ruled by access, by whispers, by who was spoken about and who was. Hedda Hopper didn't invent this system, but she understood it better than almost anyone alive. And when she smiled in that Beverly Hills suite, she wasn't agreeing to a favor. She was being invited to aim a weapon the studio could never publicly acknowledge it owned. The most dangerous weapon in Hollywood. Not scandal. Not exposure. Absence. And once that weapon was used successfully, it would never need to be explained again. The pressure, silence, and hidden consequences. By the time Hedda Hopper reaches the elevator, the decision has already begun to work. Not because she's written a word, but because she hasn't. That night, nothing appears in her column. No hint, no warning, no veiled jab. The morning papers arrive exactly as expected. Hollywood scans them the way it always does, quickly, greedily, then moves on. Except a few people notice what isn't there. The rising actor's name is missing from the usual places. No mention of the upcoming premiere, no flattering aside about a bright new talent, no casual reference that would normally appear without effort. At first, it feels like coincidence. In 1946, coincidence is how most careers die. The studio doesn't announce anything either. MGM never does. There is no suspension, no breach of contract, no disciplinary memo that can be photographed or leaked. The word uncooperative remains locked inside internal files, spoken only in rooms where doors close softly. Instead, the pressure moves sideways. A casting assistant quietly removes a name from a short list. A publicist delays returning a call. A photographer suddenly becomes unavailable. An invitation to a studio luncheon never arrives. None of these things are dramatic on their own. Together they form a pattern. The actor notices it first in the smallest ways: a meeting that gets postponed twice, a screen test that never seems to be scheduled, a friendly studio secretary who stops making eye contact. Then come the explanations. Budgets tightened. Schedules changed. Maybe next quarter. No one sounds hostile, that's the point. Hostility can be fought, this can't. Meanwhile, Hedda Hopper's silence becomes louder. Other columnists notice it too. They don't mention it publicly, but they clock it. Hopper doesn't miss things by accident. If she's not writing about someone, there's a reason. And in Hollywood, reasons travel faster than facts. Executives at rival studios take note. They don't call MGM to ask questions. They don't need to. The absence itself is the message. If Hopper isn't defending someone, she's not supposed to. So they keep their distance. This is how blacklists begin before they're ever named. Not with lists. With hesitations. With unreturned calls. With a growing sense that being associated with the wrong person could make you the next name that quietly disappears. Back at MGM, the memo does its work without ever leaving the building. The publicity chief doesn't need to issue instructions. Everyone understands the temperature shift. Assistants sense it. Department heads feel it in meetings where one name is no longer spoken aloud. When someone does mention the actor tentatively, it's met with a pause. A glance. A subject change. And after a few of those moments, no one mentions the name again. This is the real power of coordinated silence. It requires no enforcement once it's understood. The actor tries to push back, carefully, politely, through agents, not demands, but agents sense danger faster than talent ever does. They hedge, they soften, they begin preparing other clients. No one wants to be seen advocating too hard. Advocacy implies disagreement. Disagreement implies risk. And risk is contagious. Hopper, for her part, remains publicly gracious. She attends premieres, she smiles for photographers, she praises films she's meant to praise. Nothing in her column suggests malice. That's what makes her so effective. She doesn't need to attack. She just needs to confirm who still matters. And who doesn't. Privately, studio executives understand the bargain they've struck. By letting Hopper see the memo, by letting her read that line out loud, they've turned an internal judgment into an external reality. If they ever reverse course, they'll need her again. And that's the trap. Because now the studio doesn't control the silence alone. It shares it. Weeks pass, then months. The actor's name drops lower on call sheets. Roles that once seemed inevitable evaporate. When they finally land a small part, it's uncredited, easy to miss, easy to forget. At social events, people stop asking, "What are you working on?" They ask, "How are things?" It's a subtle change but devastating. "How are things" is what you ask when you already know the answer. By the end of the year, the actor understands something they were never supposed to learn this clearly. Talent wasn't the problem. Behavior wasn't the problem. The problem was alignment. Hollywood didn't punish dissent loudly, it simply withdrew recognition until dissent became invisible. And Hedda Hopper sat at the center of that system, not as a tyrant, but as a signal relay. She didn't decide who lived or died in Hollywood. She decided who was acknowledged. Which in practice was the same thing. The studio fixers from that Beverly Hills suite never speak of the meeting again. They don't need to, its outcome is written everywhere that matters. And nowhere that can be proven. But there's something else happening beneath the surface. Others are watching. Actors, writers, directors. They see what happened without being told, they adjust, they soften opinions, they learn when to laugh at jokes they don't find funny, they learn when to stay quiet. Because everyone now understands that the most dangerous thing you can be in Hollywood isn't controversial. It's unsupported. And that realization spreads faster than fear ever could. By the time the actor finally stops trying to fight it, the damage is complete. Not because anyone destroyed them outright, but because everyone agreed not to save them. And the most unsettling part is this. No one involved feels guilty. The studio protected its authority. Hopper protected her relevance. Everyone else protected themselves. Which leaves only one unanswered question. What happens when someone finally realizes the silence isn't accidental? And decides to break it? The realization, fallout, and haunting aftermath. The realization doesn't arrive all at once. It never does. It comes in fragments, a canceled meeting that isn't rescheduled, a familiar face at a studio gate that pretends not to see you, a script that gets lost and never found. For the actor, the moment of clarity arrives quietly late one evening, sitting alone with a stack of unopened trade papers. Their name hasn't appeared in weeks, not even in passing, not even in the margins. That's when it becomes clear. This isn't bad luck. This is design. Hollywood didn't reject them. Hollywood erased them. There's no villain to confront, no office to storm, no headline to refute. Every door that closes does so politely, every explanation sounds reasonable, every person insists they're powerless. And in a way they are. Because this kind of power doesn't belong to any single person once it's set in motion. It belongs to the system. Hedda Hopper continues writing. She doesn't mention the actor, she doesn't need to, her silence has already done its work. If asked directly, hypothetically, casually, she would likely shrug and say nothing unkind. That's how the business is, she might say. And she would be right. But what's unsettling is how few people remember the moment it began. The memo never leaks. The meeting is never documented. There's no dramatic fallout, no public feud, no cautionary tale officially told. Which makes it even more effective. Years later, historians will debate why certain promising careers stalled. They'll point to changing tastes, bad choices, timing, personal issues, anything but the truth. Because the truth is uncomfortable. The truth is that one line of internal language read out loud in the wrong room was enough to redirect a life. And that the room stayed quiet on purpose. For the studio, the lesson is invaluable. They've learned they don't need public discipline. They don't need legal battles or dramatic dismissals. All they need is alignment with the people who shape perception. And they learned something else too. Fear doesn't need to be broadcast. It only needs to be demonstrated once. After that, it becomes self-enforcing. Actors who hear whispers of the incident, never confirmed, never denied, adjust their behavior. They attend the dinners, they smile at the right people, they avoid being labeled anything at all. Especially uncooperative. Hedda Hopper, meanwhile, cements her role not just as a columnist, but as an unofficial arbiter of legitimacy. She doesn't hold meetings like that often, she doesn't have to. The story travels without her repeating it. A glance here. A pause there. A silence where praise should be. And Hollywood listens. The actor eventually leaves town or stays and fades. The ending varies, but the pattern doesn't. In later interviews, if they give any at all, they speak vaguely. They talk about a different era or missteps or the way things were done. They never name names. Because even years later, the fear lingers. Not of retaliation. Of irrelevance. And that's the haunting part. This story doesn't end in 1946. It doesn't end with Hedda Hopper. It doesn't even end with old Hollywood. Because the mechanism never went away. It just learned to operate more quietly. Today, when a career stalls without explanation, when opportunities vanish without conflict, when someone becomes strangely absent from conversations they once dominated, the same logic is at work. Not loudly, not publicly, but efficiently. Silence, coordinated and agreed upon, is still the most powerful tool in any industry built on attention. And once you've seen how easily it can be deployed, you start to notice it everywhere. The scariest part isn't that it happened. It's how normal it felt to everyone in the room. How quickly they accepted it. How easily they moved on. Because when power learns it doesn't need to speak to be obeyed, it never raises its voice again. And somewhere in a quiet room, a line is still being read. And the room is still going silent.